process actually starts before the students even get to the class. So the past weekend, the students had posted learning objectives up on the website to make sure that they were clear on what was expected of them before they arrived in class this morning. And so they took on this process of knowledge acquisition before they got to class. And then fast forward to this morning, 8:29 a.m., bright and early, 8:30 class, which we all love, Mark. And the class was about to start. Every student was in their seat. The students had their laptops open. They were ready to go. And once the clock hit 8:30, they immediately began what we call the individual readiness assessment. Mm-hmm. Now, this is generally a 5 to 10 question multiple choice assessment, which again tests their knowledge of the learning objectives they got over the weekend and tests their knowledge of the base concepts that they're going to need to move forward to the activities in class ahead. Mm-hmm. So I gave them 10 minutes to complete this, and at 8:40, they immediately submitted all their answers and then turned towards their teammates and began to do a more low-tech version of what we call the team readiness assessment. And so the team version is the same 5 or 10 questions they did as an individual, but now they take that assessment, this quiz, as a team. So as soon as they began, the room erupted and the team began discussion question 1. And once the teams had decided on an answer, so say answer choice B, they have a little scratch-off card, kind of like a lottery ticket. So they look at question 1, answer choice B. They scratch that off. And if they see a star, then they know they got that answer correct, that question. But if there's no star, they know, okay, now let's reassess question 1. It wasn't B. What else could it be? And they begin this discussion back and forth. And we know that the students get the correct answer because we hear this cheer comes up from the groups, and they say, yes, we did it, we got it.
And you know when they get it wrong, because you hear everyone go,
you're kind of moan. So again, this was the second 10 minutes. So at the end of this process, we've got 20 minutes at the beginning of the learning process, and what we've done is to bring all of the students and their individual questions up to the same level of understanding. Okay, and so that's really at the core of the readiness assessment process. So on the individual test that they took first, Mark, what do you think their average score was in that individual part?
I'm going to guess and say maybe an 84?
83,
Ooh.
Actually. Very close, very close. So then I asked them, so they got an 83, and I said, okay, which questions did you all struggle with as a team, right? This is after they've taken both the individual and the group part, and there was silence. I waited 8, 10 seconds, 15 seconds. And what had happened is that all teams had scored 100% in that second team part in the 60 minutes. So again, the class as a whole had gone from a level of understanding of 83% once they did that team part to 100%.
And does that type of thing happen in all of your classes?
Well, I had a feeling that you might ask this, Mark, so a stickler for evidence. So I actually checked the scores before we came on the webinar here, and so far in the semester, do this every week, and the individual readiness average is 87.2%, and the team readiness average is actually 99.1%. So not every time, but almost every time, the teams are scoring close to 100%, again, in groups of 4 to 5 individuals.
Wow, Craig, you're an awesome teacher.
Oh, thank you, Mark.
You know, also, and sorry to burst your bubble, that's exactly the same kind of thing that we see when we look at the literature. That's exactly in line with the data on the courses that use this particular flipped approach. Mm-hmm. Same pattern across subjects and institutions. Are you crying, Craig?
I'll survive.
You're okay?
Thank you.
Okay.
Yeah.
Sorry. So one study, for example, it examined scores from over 1,600 teams across 20 years and found that teams outscored their highest performing members by an average of 11%. Now, that's not just the individual average versus the team average. That's the highest scoring individual in the team versus the team average. Well, Craig, what about the students that don't do well on the individual readiness assessments? I know the answer to this, but Craig, let me ask you. Why don't you tell everyone, how is this addressed?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so the ones who don't do well on the individual part, first they have the opportunity to learn from each other, right, in that group or team readiness assessment. But secondly, after they've done both the individual and the team readiness assessment, I have the opportunity to give a very brief lecture that is in response how they did on these questions. So again, it focuses my lecture not on all the topics that I think are important, but are on the topics that they have the most difficulty with. And it allows us to bypass those topics that they already understand or don't have trouble with.